Hi there. My name's John Albiston. I'm here to talk to you about why you should know who gives what. Now, in a lot of churches, there's been a tradition where the pastor has been in the dark when it comes to who the key financial supporters of the church are. Well, this hamstrings you in some very important ways. Can you imagine trying to lead a church if you didn't have a clue who the other leaders were? If you didn't know who the members of your team were and who you could count on, your leadership would be very ineffective. Can you imagine trying to mobilize the church without having a clue who the actual volunteers are? You didn't know who did what or who did anything. That would be really, really hard to mobilize that church. Well, in the exact same way, if you're trying to effectively fund the church and you don't know who your key financial supporters are, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Well, what happens when you don't know who gives what? Well, there's several things that are very predictable that happen as a result. First, you're going to select poorer quality leaders. Well, why would this be the case? Well, first of all, some people become leaders by their deeds. They do a lot, they work a lot, and because of that, they gain positions of influence. Some people gain positions of leadership because of their sacrifice. They give a lot. And others, it isn't big sacrifice that gets them positions, but having big mouths. Some people just talk a lot. Those are leaders of a much lower caliber. Well, when you don't know who gives what, many of your most committed supporters are going to be invisible to you. You're going to have people who believe in you, who believe in the mission, and are willing to personally sacrifice for that. They put their money where their mouth is. But if you're hidden from that, you do not know who those people are, these people are going to be invisible to you. And you're going to miss out on some real key potential leaders. Instead, because you don't know who actually puts their money where their mouth is, you're only going to know who opens their mouths. And so you're going to have that tendency to select leaders who have no skin in the game. In fact, it's one of the reasons why boards often don't want their pastors to know who gives what, because those board members themselves aren't giving a dime to the church. Something else that happens is that you're not going to be able to express appropriate gratitude. Well, why would this matter, really? Well, it is our job fundamentally to encourage people to do the right thing. Now, we do this with volunteers and staff members all the time. When we see somebody doing something good, doing something right, well, we encourage that, we support that. And volunteers who don't get that encouragement and support, well, they start looking at their tasks as being somewhat thankless. And they tend to burn out. Nobody notices what they're doing. Nobody knows that they're making a contribution. Maybe their contribution really isn't valued. Maybe it really doesn't matter. That's how we get volunteer burnout. Well, givers are no different. When someone gives, they're doing something good. They're denying themselves. They're picking up their cross and they're following Jesus in their finances. And if we don't acknowledge that, if we don't show support and encouragement that, they believe that their sacrifice is a thankless sacrifice, that it really doesn't matter, that it's not really important. That's the opposite of what we should be trying to do. Another thing happened is you're going to be blind in one eye as a disciple maker. Well, how does this happen? Well, when people decide to follow Jesus, they surrender both their time and their treasure. So they're going to give up more hours of their day for the cause of Christ and more dollars out of their wallet for the cause of Christ. However, this rarely happens in exactly equal measures. Depending on the person's life experiences and life circumstances, they might be able to give more than others. You might have a real on-fire disciple who's growing in their faith and growing in their passion, but because of their work schedule and their travel schedule, they may not be able to volunteer very consistently, but they're able to give very consistently. Well, if you're not able to see those giving habits, you're not going to notice that that person is getting on fire. You're not going to notice that that person is growing, and you're not going to take the time to invest in them. When we are blind to this important aspect of someone's spiritual growth, there's many willing hearts that we should be investing in that we're going to overlook. we're not going to be paying attention to people that we should be paying attention to. Well, what happens when you do know who gives what? Well, there's several predictable things that happen then. First, you're going to be a much more effective disciple maker. Discipleship is a journey. It's not a magic wand. It's a path where people start off at one step and then they take the next and they take the next and they take the next. 1 John chapter 2 describes this as some people start off as little children, then they move to young men, then they grow to spiritual fathers. It's a journey. Well, we can observe this journey, and certainly one aspect, by looking at someone's giving habits. When someone is a new believer or just buying into the vision, they might make their first gift. And as they grow in maturity and grow in faith, those gifts are going to become more regular. And as they continue to grow, they're going to increase in size and in regularity. This is an important indicator of where their faith is at. Well, when we observe and respond to someone's growth journey, that's really important. And observing and responding to their growth journey in finances is just as important as observing and responding to their growth in prayer, their growth in Bible reading, and their growth in volunteering. As effective disciple makers, we should be observing and responding to people's growth journey. Second thing is you're going to have significantly more buy-in from your people. See, great leaders are great leaders because they invest in and they develop great followers. It's all about investment in people. Now, when someone first starts to serve, well, then we naturally should be delivering coaching and encouragement to that new volunteer. I've done this for years, and when you do that, you're going to get more volunteers. Well, it's no different when someone gives. When someone first starts to give, if we deliver that same kind of coaching and encouragement to that new giver, that's going to have a big impact. Third, quite frankly, you're going to have more money for the mission. Your church is going to be much more financially secure, financially healthy, and you're going to be able to accomplish more for the kingdom of God. See, when you notice and invest in your volunteers, you end up with more and more committed volunteers. I coach a number of different churches, and some churches say, wow, we have a hard time getting volunteers, and others have tons of volunteers. And in my own pastoral career, I've been on both sides. The difference that went from, in my ministry, from having no volunteers to having tons of volunteers was this key principle of investing in these people. When you notice and invest in your volunteers, you end up with more and more committed volunteers. Well, in the exact same way, when you notice and invest in your givers, you end up with more and more generous givers. The fact of the matter is, no one has the ability to raise funds for the mission quite like the pastor. People give to vision, and who can articulate that vision better than pastor? People give to someone that they trust. Well, who in the church has more trust than the pastor? When the pastor knows who gives and who has the capacity to give and the willingness to give, and invests in that person and responds to that person, you're going to have a much more financially secure church.